It is heartbreaking. It's maybe one of the worst things about the ongoing war on terror, right? Which is that beyond the millions of people who have died, the destruction of countries around the world, which have generational impacts. In addition to that, we are now seeing the generational impacts of these munitions that you were talking about, depleted uranium used in them, this thorium that is in them, which eventually causes horrific and very serious birth defects. And what's so unbelievably sad about this is that beyond the actual suffering that these children are going through is the fact that our military and our government won't even recognize it, discuss it, talk about it, or accept that this is a reality of again, the ongoing consequence of these wars.
And that's a great point that you bring up, because they don't discuss it. I mean, you have to twist arms just to get them to talk about the after effects the burn pits in Iraq have caused on veterans who've come back, and the amount of neurological damage and other strange diseases there.
And let's just talk, can we just mention something about that too? Because the burn pits are important for viewers who don't understand this. So the U.S. military, when they're in these locations, have these pits where they burn chemicals and they burn all kinds of toxic items, right, that are thrown into this. And the inhalation from those burn pits causes not only birth defects as well and serious issues, but chronic issues in U.S. soldiers as well. So, one thing that rarely gets talked about anymore is something called Gulf War syndrome, right?
Yes.
So go back to the 1991 Gulf War, the original one, right? 250,000 veterans who served in the Gulf War. Of the 600 and I think something like 697,000 who served, have Gulf War syndrome. Now, when you say Gulf War syndrome, that even sounds like a PTSD kind of thing. It's not. These are physical defects. These are chronic headaches and migraines. And then again, the birth defects that can come from that as well. So going back to the original Gulf War, we still have veterans who are suffering from that. And those numbers pale in comparison to the number of veterans who will suffer as a result of these wars that we're in right now.
It's true, and that's the thing that when I read these stories about you have kids being born with Iraqi children being born with these birth defects just 10 kilometers and under away from these bases. The thing that then immediately springs into my mind, having known about Gulf War syndrome and the issue of the burn pits, is: are we now going to see U.S. soldiers who served in these areas now come home and suddenly this rise in birth defects? I mean, is that a real issue that we could see?
I think it is a real issue, as I mentioned, because we've seen this with Gulf War. Now, we haven't seen the same kind of issues in terms of birth defects as we're seeing with the issues the soldiers themselves carry. So the veterans themselves are carrying severe issues in terms of what they come back with. But the children who are in Iraq right now, this next generation of Iraqis, we're talking about thousands who have not only the birth defects as a result of the uranium, but then would pass that along to their children very possibly as well. So again, it's multi-generational. And this is what's so frustrating, I think, when you cover the war on terror, is the fact that everything is viewed in the mainstream, kind of viewpoint as being the right now and what's next. And very little looks at, here's the consequence of what we're doing. Veteran suicides, we talk about it quite a bit, right? It's a major issue, just as the healthcare issues. We're talking about trillions with the T, trillions of dollars in healthcare that have to go to U.S. veterans who have served in these wars, and we're not even slowing down. There is no appetite in Washington to say, let's slow down and recognize the consequence of this for generations to come.
It's hard enough just to get Washington to recognize the consequences of the first responders at 9/11, let alone the health consequences that's happened to the veterans over the years, because they're very quick to always parade the veterans out, and maybe they'll give them a little bill here and there just to kind of say, hey, look at how great we are. But there's not any real long-lasting, real hardcore look at what the issues that affect
because you don't make money off it, right?
Exactly.
You can't make money off the veterans and what they're going through, but you do make money off continuing to build weapons and continuing to send those weapons overseas.